Pepe, what are you doing? The hat is too tight. It kill your brain. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of giant monster movies. I am your host, Travis, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Michaelus Hamiltonius.
Well, hello there, Travis. How are you doing this fine evening?
We're doing good. We're doing good.
That's the best I can come up with on short notice.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, man. Well, we have a packed episode this week, so we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to start with the news.
Cue the beady beady.
Cue the beady beady. All right, so the first bit of news that we are going to talk about this week is Sony has announced that they are currently developing a film adaptation of Aftershock's upcoming comic, The Kaiju Score. The story for the film will follow 4 criminals attempting the perfect heist in the middle of a giant monster attack on the city. Now, this sounds great. I am looking forward to this.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'll agree. It does sound interesting. So they basically just made a movie about looters.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like that. They had one recently that was about. It was called Storm Heist or something like that, or Hurricane Heist. Something like
Hurricane Heist. Because I heard somebody else on another podcast talk about it. But
yeah, and they that that was about a heist in the middle of the hurricane. So I'm like transferring that over into the kaiju world and being like in the middle of this kaiju attack, some people go and loot things like that. That sounds really interesting. I'm all for anytime somebody wants to do a story that is the outside the normal realm of like kaiju. Like usually when you're doing a kaiju story, it's always the heroes who are trying to stop the monster or trying to survive the monster attack. But then you go with the ones who are like the ones who are looting, or the ones who are just like the little standby guys, not the military or scientists or anything like that. I like when they do that.
Yeah, should be interesting. I hope it doesn't turn out to be like another Cloverfield, but we'll see.
I mean, a lot of people like Cloverfield. I'm not crazy about it, but a lot of people do like Cloverfield.
That's true. But I've often said how interesting would it be if we had a human drama story where a kaiju is around. It's like background noise, but the entire movie is focused on the human drama. It just so happens that there's a kaiju also in this movie as well, and it sounds like that's what Sony's trying to do here.
Yeah. Now this is going to be based on a comic book. Now what's interesting is that this comic book hasn't come out yet, which means that when this was being written, this was optioned for a film adaptation before it was actually even finished. So that's an interesting thing that somebody like Sony jumped on it so quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially from Aftershock, because Aftershock's not one of the big comic book publishers that you hear about all the time. Like, you hear DC, Marvel, those ones like that. Even Dark Horse and Image, but Aftershock is kind of like a weird little side one.
So it's like just so they're like the Arrow of the comic book world.
Yeah. That's a good description of them.
Because Arrow specializes, don't they specialize in very niche genre films and very niche movies? That don't get a whole lot of mainstream attention.
Right, exactly. And Aftershock is kind of like that. Aftershock tends to do very adult oriented comic books, if I remember right. And I have to tell listeners right now, I know where I'm interrupting this news topic, but if you guys hear noise in the background, It is the podcast cat. She is being a pain and will not get off the desk. So I am trying to record around the cat, who is just sitting on my desk and rolling around and making all kinds of distractions and noise. So if you guys hear noise in the background, I'm sorry, but I can't help it, because if anybody who owns cats knows, you cannot control your cat. They do what they want.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, you have 3 of them that are so well behaved and never do anything.
Exactly. They're all so photogenic. They behave themselves. I have no problems whatsoever out of any of my animals.
Yeah. Cat, Daisy, you want to say hi to your fans? Want to say hi to the listeners? She's like, no, I'm just going to cause problems. Okay, well,
that's
anyway.
Such is life. That's fine.
Yeah. All right. Ready to move on to the next story?
Well, we didn't even touch on there's a photo here of the kaiju.
Oh,
himself.
yeah. It looks kind of like a Pacific Rim type kaiju.
On my notepad here, I literally wrote Daddy Gamera and Mommy Zigra had a baby.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it's got the turtle shell, it's got the Gamera tusks, it's got the shark face that sort of resembles a goblin shark, and Zigra was modeled after a goblin shark. So yeah, there you go. It's if Zigra and Gamera had a baby. So let that image sink into you right now. Let that image just wash over you. And that's what you would get with this image that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah. It's a cool looking design though. It really is. So I'm guessing this is from the comic book, and this is not just an image that's attached to this story for no reason.
I'm assuming so, because it looks very comic booky. I just made up a word there. So yeah, I think it's fine. I think it looks good. It'll be interesting to see how they bring it to life. I'm not sure. I was looking through this. I was looking through the article here, and I don't see an actual tentative release date, unless I'm overlooking it.
Well, if it's in development, then it's probably in early stages of development, which means they're probably still writing the script, probably still, storyboarding, all that kind of stuff. So it's still early days, so I'm sure they're not going to know when it's going to come out for a while. But we're hopefully it will see the light of day. If not, then I will just, I'm going to pick up the comic book just to check it out, because anytime there's a kaiju comic book that comes out, I'm going to check it out. So, well, let's go ahead and jump into the next next bit of news, because we've got a few more news items that we want to cover this week. So, the new trailer for Tremors: Shrieker Island, the 7th movie in the franchise, has hit the internet, and it looks sick. It looks so good. The trailer comes out with the announcement that this movie will be available to own on DVD, Blu-ray, and digital on October 20th. So, did you get a chance to look at the trailer for Tremors: Shrieker Island?
I did. And did you say 17th, not 7th, right?
Yeah, the 7th.
You said the 7th. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I got it. I'm a little slow on the uptake this week.
It's fine. It didn't quite land for me either, so I'm sorry, audio listener. Anyway, yeah, I watched it. It looked in my notes. I wrote down about it was, basically just the CGI looks really great. It's been a long time now. Granted, it's been a long time since I've watched a Tremors movie. I think the last movie literally the last Tremors movie I watched was 3, and that was probably 6 months ago. So I knew there were more. I've just never really had the desire to watch them. But given the trailer, I think I'm gonna have to watch this, and I think we might have to review it.
Oh yeah, we definitely need to review this on the podcast. I really like the Tremors movies. The problem I have with this trailer, and really it's a problem with the most recent Tremors movies in general,
Napoleon
is yeah, well, yeah. But it's that they've moved away from the practical effects and are doing full CGI. Daisy, dumb cat. They're moving away from the practical effects, and they're doing full CGI for the monsters, and I'm not a fan of that. One of the great things about the original Tremors movies is their reliance on practical effects.
Right.
And I think that's really great. And so I hate that the franchise has gone the route of, I mean, I get it, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. I would be disappointed too if I was a longtime Tremors fan, because that's sort of what they were known for, was sort of those. I'm not gonna say cheesy, because the first Tremors film, I wouldn't say that was cheesy, because given it was like what, 92? Was it 92? Something like that?
90.
Something like that. Yeah, it was in the very early 90s when that film
Yeah,
first-
1990. It was in 1990.
Okay. So for that, I mean, for what it was, those practical effects were really good. And I'm hesitant really to say this, but and I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to sound like super elitist, but I feel like unless you're Toho, you really have a hard time getting away with practical effects these days.
Well, Toho even. I mean, look at Shin Godzilla.
That's true, but from what I'm understanding, whatever Godzilla, whatever that franchise looks like after GVK, from what I've read little, I've read very little about it, because there's very little to tell right now. But Toho is going to go back to some they are going to be using some practical effects. So to what extent, I have no idea. But there is rumblings out there that Toho is going back to the practical effects.
Yeah. So on the podcast, we have covered the first two Tremors movies. Me and Sam covered those back in the day. And to Sam's chagrin, because Sam was not a huge fan of, well, he wasn't a huge fan of the second one. I remember him liking the first one, but he just didn't really like the second one. But then we also had Tremors 3 Back to Perfection. You had the fourth one, which was kind of a prequel to the rest of them. Then the fifth one was Bloodlines. That's when they went to Africa. And then the sixth one was Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell, which is, as far as I know, all of them are still available on Netflix here in North America. So I need to go and watch A Cold Day in Hell, because I don't think I watched A Cold Day in Hell, but I have seen all the other ones.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I haven't seen a Tremors. I have not watched a contemporary. I can't. Nah, hang on. Let me back up. You'll need
a Twemos movie.
Yeah, a Twemmer. A Twemmer.
Haven't watched a Twemos movie.
Oh boy. Oh man, you're gonna make me leave this in, aren't you? I haven't watched a Tremors movie in months, and it was the original, and I think maybe like the first two. I haven't seen any of the more contemporary ones.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested, you can check out the trailer for this. I do like that they have redesigned I like that the monsters, the graboids and the shriekers and all of them, that outside of the American Southwest that they, the first few movies took place in, that they are different. That the creatures actually look different depending on where in the world they are and where they go. Like the ones in Africa looked different. Now the ones in Canada look different. Now the ones here on this island look different. So I like that they are taking the time to redesign the monsters to keep them interesting. Like I said, I wish that they had stuck to practical effects. But if anybody's interested in watching this, it will be available on October 20th, and we will probably review it on the podcast.
We most likely will. We're actually in the process now of thinking about our 2021 schedule.
Yep. Yep, we are, because we're getting close to the end of the year. Well, I say that. I mean, we're only at the end of August, but
Yeah,
our
close.
schedule for this year is full, and we're looking at what we're going to be doing next year.
Right, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
But it looks a lot of, long story short, looks a lot of fun. Go watch it.
Yeah. So another bit of news I wanted to cover just real quick is we have a live streaming event that's going to be available on October 2nd through the 4th. That is called Kaiju Masterclass. It's going to be a deep dive into Japanese science fiction or Japanese science film is what it says, but I think it's science fiction, film, and television with the genre creators, historians, and researchers. Like I said, the 2-day event is going to be on October 2nd through the 4th. It's going to be live streamed, and it's going to be free and open to the online community. So anybody who wants to check that out, they haven't announced a whole bunch of guests and yet, but I do know that the Kaiju Transmissions, our friends over at Kaiju Transmissions podcast, are going to be involved in that. So
Yep. I had seen Matt, I think it was Matt or maybe Imbird that said something about it. So yeah, I'm super excited for those guys. I'm going to be watching along probably with everybody else because I am really interested to see what they have going on. So
yeah. So we just wanted to get the word out there to everybody who might be interested in this. So stick to the social medias. I will be retweeting anything as we get more information on it. And like I said, you can check out the Kaiju Transmissions podcast and their Twitter account because they are going to be involved in it too.
Yep, for sure.
And we're going to end on some sad news this week with the news segment. Anyway, the Arrow Gamera set has come and gone.
Yep. It sure has.
So it seems that they hugely underestimated the number of copies that were needed to be produced, and that has led to it being sold out all over North America and the UK. And the saddest part of this is that this is the only printing of this version, anyway, that is going to be sold. So it is not only sold out, it is out of print.
It sure is. So congratulations to one of the 8,000 people who were lucky enough to grab one. I was a little bit worried because I did pick one up. I'm super happy with it. Super thankful that I got my hands on one. I did not double dip like you guys probably have heard me say before, just finances and all that. But I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing it. But anyway, that's another story. So yeah, apparently there was only 8,000 copies made of this thing. I think 5,000 copies came to the US, 3,000 copies came to the UK. And you are right, Travis. They drastically underestimated the amount that they were going to need. Now, I will say maybe that was on purpose because I don't know how expensive it is to produce such an extensive set like they gave us because, we got the DVDs, we got the Blu-rays, we got the comics, and we got the retrospective magazine that came with the soft cover magazine that came with the set as well. So maybe 8,000 was the only cost effective way to do it. I do know, or I have seen rather, people have asked online, specifically on Twitter, if Arrow was going to be putting out a set with just the films. And they have confirmed that eventually they will be putting out but it's not confirmed yet if it's a box set or if they're going to be releasing them individually as Blu-rays. But they do plan on releasing like the individual films, and they're going to be the same exact.
I think it's a set. I think it's a set. Yeah,
okay.
Because Arrow already has put out the individual DVDs. Like they have already released individual ones.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure this is going to be a set, but it's going to be, like you said, a very pared down version.
Right.
It's going to have all of the special features that are on the discs, according to what I've read. One of the people who was the head of the project over at Arrow has talked about it on Twitter. And he said that all the stuff that's available on the discs will still be available. but it's all of the supplemental stuff like the comic books, the magazine, the maps, all of that kind of stuff that came with it that will not be available.
Yeah, and that's super disappointing because we were all kind of hoping that it was going to be something similar to Criterion, where they had this beautiful set, and they produced. I mean, Criterion's a large company, so they were able to produce more than I'm assuming they produced well more than 8,000 copies of that Godzilla Showa set. But yeah, I see why it's so limited because of all the stuff we got with it. And, for the folks that don't care about all that stuff, or if you already have the comics in your collection, if you're already a hardcore Matt Frank art fan and you already have some of that stuff, then you just want the movies, then Arrow will be providing that for us. You just won't get some of the other additional items like the cards, the map, and et cetera, which, it's fine. But I'm disappointed for the folks that was not able to get their hands on one.
Yeah, that's kind of I mean, I didn't get one. I didn't get a set, and I'm not hugely disappointed by that because I have kind of switched over to digital exclusive and not physical media just because I just don't have room for a lot of things where I live.
You're an Arrow TV subscriber, aren't you?
Yeah. Okay. So I still can watch the movies. But I don't get all the special features and stuff that everybody else has been talking about. So yeah, I was interested in it, but I just couldn't afford it, and I couldn't make the room for it. Sure. So I'm not hugely disappointed for myself, but for other people who were waiting until it came out, because like majority of the sales, like they were sold out within the first few days because most of the sales were all pre-orders.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anybody was the kind of person who was waiting till it actually was on sale before buying it, then they probably missed out on it. Yeah, and
there was very few people that I know that was able to get a copy of it after it was released. I know our friend Alex from Monsters vs. Men, he was able to get one after it was actually released because because there was a lot of orders, a lot of pre-orders got canceled on people. Like I saw a lot of orders from like Deep Discount and some other places and Amazon, their orders just being canceled. And the only explanation they're getting is they ran out of supply, or their copy got quote unquote lost. So I would say they drastically underestimated the amount of copies that they were going to need, or the 8,000 was on purpose because of all the extras we got. I don't know which side I err on, but either one is plausible. But I will say this. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I will say I have read through The Last Hope, which is the Gamera prequel comic that came with this set, which was an exclusive to this set, and it is really good. I know I said this for the Ultraman Blu-ray, but I never got around to it. But I do plan on doing some kind of bonus episode for this podcast where I talk about the Gamera set itself.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if we could get Elijah on for that too, because I know Elijah has gone through and like just in our group chat that we have, has broken down what's available, what's not available, what was included in original releases that's not included in this set, all that kind of stuff. So he would be a good person to also include in that.
Yeah, I may actually do that, because you're right, because Elijah from Kaiju Conversations is a wealth of knowledge, because he is to say that he is a physical media nut is an understatement.
Oh yeah.
He is a fanatic on physical media. He has probably the biggest physical media collection I have ever seen. And yeah, he would be. I think you're right. I may actually reach out to him after this recording and see if he'd be wanting to collaborate on some kind of bonus episode for us.
Yeah. So everybody can stay tuned for that. All right. Well, that's it for the news this week. Let's get into our main topic. Okay.
Sorry about that.
I thought you hit a gong, like dong.
No, I was reaching for my water and I hit my knuckle on the table here, and my ring and my wedding ring tapped against the table. Sorry about that. If you leave that in, listener, sorry about that.
I just thought, it's like, let's get to our main topic. Dong, big old gong.
It was perfect. I should have just left it alone and said, "Yep,
Yeah.
that's our new main topic sound effect."
Yeah. So last week we asked a trivia question hinting to what our topic was for this week. The trivia question was, what giant monster film takes place partly in Italy only because Ray Harryhausen wanted to vacation there? And we got a lot of answers. So starting with Jim Till, who answered Ymir's movie, which, yes, it is. It's Ymir's movie. It's the movie that I don't know how exactly you're supposed to say that. I've always seen it written down, but the monster from this movie, Ymir.
I think it's Ymir.
Ymir.
I'm not 100% sure because they don't ever say it in the film.
Right. Yeah, they never say it in the film. O'Riordan Carol said the Valley of Guanji, which close, but nope, that wasn't it. Then we had Luis Hernandez, who said 20 million miles to Earth, which is the correct answer. Luis, also, I wanted to point out, is a fantastic artist and has an Etsy page and an Instagram account that you can go and check out his artwork. He is the one, I sent you a picture, Michael, of the Baragon, kind of classic Japanese oil or watercolor.
Yeah. It's man, it's beautiful artwork.
Yeah, I love it so much. It's like classic Japanese watercolor, but it's Baragon. Oh man, I love it. And he does a lot of giant monsters. He has recently branched out from the Toho kind of and Gamera world and has started doing more American monsters. So like he's done King Kong, he did the giant ants from them. I know he did G98 too. So I will include the links to his Instagram and to his Etsy because anybody who's interested in giant monsters and loves art should check out his stuff because he does fantastic work.
Oh, for sure. It's beautiful. It is beautiful.
Yeah. Michael Zabkar said 20 million miles to Earth, as well as Wild Strike on Twitter. He said 20 million. Just 20 million. Now, I don't know if that he means 20 million miles to Earth or if he's offering us $20 million to give him the answer.
I will take the 20 million and see ya. Not doing this.
Yeah.
Not doing this anymore.
Yeah. Podcast is over with.
Yep.
We've hit it big.
I get 15 million and Travis gets 5.
I'll actually, you know what? I'll be happy with 5 million. I was gonna say something about like, you know what? No, if someone offers you 5 million, I'm not gonna argue with it. Jurassic Mark Mancini said 20 million miles to Earth, as well as Will Harburth. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Will Harburth said 20 million miles to Earth. Kevin Morn gave us the name of the monster, Ymir. Kaiju Conversation, so talk about Elijah, said 20 million miles to Earth. And then we get into the funny answers and the more interesting answers. We've got Monster Island Film Vault podcast that said the Godzilla father, which admittedly works better in text form than saying out loud. But it's a funny one anyway. It's the Godfather, but it's Godzilla father.
Right. Yeah, that's the way I read it. I was like, I'm like you. I was trying to figure out what he was saying.
Yeah.
Like the Godzilla father? Like
Jimmy from NASA said Hercules against the Beast from 20,000 miles to Earth.
Okay, that sounds like a really cool movie though.
Yeah, it's like a combination of every Harryhausen film ever made. And I kind of like it.
Pretty much.
The Giant Monster BS guys said 20 million Monsters Inc. Oh man, you
It's
guys.
funny because we talked a little. I think we talked a little bit about that when I guested on their most recent episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh man, I still gotta listen to that. I need to go and listen to that right away. I keep forgetting about that it's on my phone. I have it downloaded, but I keep forgetting that it's on there. Then best friend Kershaw sent in a nice little note here. He said 20 million miles to Earth is his answer. But then he also gave us a fact. Did you know that Gene Simmons said that the creature in this film is the inspiration to how he moves on stage?
Huh.
Whenever he's performing. Apparently, he's a huge Harryhausen film. Yes, he is. He's a huge monster film in general because
I knew that he's a big Godzilla fan too.
Yeah, and part of his costume's actually designed to look like Gorgo. So it's inspired by Gorgo. So yeah, he's a huge monster fan. And he also said, also, did you know that there's a sequel comic to this, 20 Million Miles More? I was aware of that. I don't know if Michael, you were aware of that.
I was not. Now I need to watch. I need to find this somewhere and watch it.
Yeah, it's the comic book. They did a few. Let's see, probably about 10 years ago, maybe less. They did an entire series that was the Ray Harryhausen collection, of comic books. And so they did sequels to most of the Harryhausen comic books. So they had like 20 Million Miles More. It Came from Beneath the Sea Again. They had a Jason and the Argonauts sequel. Wrath of the Titans was from that. They did a bunch of them.
We've been getting a lot of Harryhausen media lately, I feel like, which rightfully so. It would have been his 100th birthday this past June, was it?
Yeah, June or July, somewhere around there.
I think it was in maybe July. Because he shares a birthday with another friend of mine. So yeah, but we've been getting a lot of Harryhausen media lately, I feel like.
Yeah. So what I want to do one day, and I don't know how soon or how far away we are from doing that, but I really would like for us to go through some of the sequel comics to some of these Harryhausen films, because they are really interesting, and I would really like to see. I'd really like to read some of these because I haven't actually read. I know about them. I haven't read the sequels to them. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of comic books that are sequels to the Harryhausen. Like I said, it was the Harryhausen collection that they put out, and I actually do know where I can get them digitally. So I'm gonna be buying them digitally to be able to review on the podcast.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I'll try to find them somewhere.
I'll send you where you can get them digitally.
Okay.
Because the company that produced them is out of business now. They don't exist anymore, so you're not going to be able to get printed copies unless you just happen to find them in like a back issue box. But they are available on some digital sites. So anyway, and then I want to get to my favorite answer for this week that we got, which was from Nick Blackler, who said, and he prefaced, this should be read in a gruff old Italian accent for best effect. So I'm going to get my Italian accent going. Okay.
Composure.
Olafir Piero, the 50-foot olive.
That sounded more French than Italian.
Yeah, it did. Olafir Piero, the 50-foot olive.
Olafir Italio to the 50-foot olive. That's
Olafir Piero, the 50-foot olive. I'm doing the hand gestures too, by the way.
I am too. I feel like it helps. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that, or we appreciate that. It's been a while since you've sent us anything. So yeah, we're glad to see you back, man.
Yeah, well, he was back. He was back with the last one. The last one was the one.
That's true. Yeah, but
came back.
It's been a while since Nick. It's been a while since Nick sent us anything like as far as an answer to a question though.
No, well, that's what I'm saying. Like last week was the first time he had been back for a while. So,
Okay, Travis, show the listener how much I pay attention to our own
yeah,
show.
I know you don't remember anything about our episodes once they're over with. It was just last week.
Buddy, I don't even know what I had for lunch I don't even know what I had for lunch yesterday.
I don't even remember what I had for lunch today, and it was like an hour ago.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, moving on.
So our main topic, of course, everyone has figured out by now, is 20 Million Miles to Earth. It is a movie that is directed by Nathan H. Juaran.
I want to say is the J and H sound?
I don't
Maybe
know.
Warren. Maybe
Warren,
we'll go with
or
that.
yeah. And then he doesn't matter. What really matters is the technical effects were done by Ray Harryhausen. I mean, this whole film was done as a way to showcase Harryhausen's special effects, his stop motion effects. So the director is important, but not as important as Ray Harryhausen doing the technical effects. But you also had William Hopper, Joan Taylor, and Frank Puglia.
Close enough.
Puglia.
Puglia. Now you're making me screw it up. That sounds a little bit more accurate, I think.
Yeah, and they were the ones who starred in the movie. So, the plot breakdown for this movie is the first spaceship to visit Venus crash lands in the sea, freeing a small native Venusian creature called the Ymir. Eventually, it grows to enormous size and threatens the city of Rome. So, getting into our opening thoughts. What are your opening thoughts on 20 Million Miles to Earth?
Well, there's one huge plot hole right off the bat. And that is, it should have been retitled 76.522 million miles to Earth. Because that's how long it takes to get from the Earth to the planet Venus.
Now, when I looked it up, it said it was 26 point something million miles.
I'm looking at
Okay.
Google Earth right here. It says current distance is 76.522 million miles.
Okay. All right. I'll trust you while I Google to make sure that you're right.
All right. Fine, Travis. I'm done. If you're going to doubt me, I'm done.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay. So, So here's it is. Because the orbits of the planets are on an ellipses, they're not perfect circles. On average, it is 25 million miles away. Though it can reach as close as 24 million miles, but at its apex, it is what it's at currently is 76.5 million.
Gotcha. All right.
So that's why the discrepancy there, because it changes.
So none of us were wrong.
None of us were right.
That's one way of looking at it too. Okay.
Anyway, go ahead with your opening thought.
Okay, so I gotta say this first because we always forget. This is part of our Space Monster Month, Space something.
Yeah, Space Monster September.
Space Monster September. There we go. Thank you, Travis. And I was really excited to do this movie because this is one of those growing up that I remember so much as a kid because I remember being so impressed. I remember being like 6-year-old me was so impressed by the design of this monster and so enthralled into the story and just thought it was just so cool because growing up as a kid all these old Harryhausen films used to come on television all the time. Now, when I first saw this movie, it was in black and white. My most recent viewing, which was literally yesterday, I watched it in color, which I'm not super impressed by the color. It looks really fake, but that's usually what happens when you try to recolor some of these old films. It's no Blob, that's for sure. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I really like this movie, and not for nostalgic reasons. The monster design is really cool. He reminds me a little bit of the Kraken, which it's probably the same maquette that they used for the Kraken in Jason. Is it Jason or is it
Clash of the Titans.
Clash of the Titans? There we go. It's probably the same maquette, at least the same head used for Clash of the Titans for the Kraken. He also reminds me a little bit of The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which also is a fantastic movie that I hope we eventually get around to. And yeah, I don't know what else to say except for I just really enjoyed this movie. You know, some of the human characters lacked a little bit, but honestly, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers. I didn't come here for the human characters. I came here for the Harryhausen. So there.
Yeah, my opening thoughts, I'm with you. I really like this movie. This is just such a great Harryhausen film. When it comes to, I know there's a big debate between, whether you watch subs or dubs when it comes to like the foreign films. I've never been one who cares. Like I'll watch dubs sometimes I'll watch sub. It just depends on my mood. But there is one thing that I am super strict on, and that is I will not watch colorized versions of movies, or at least not. I don't prefer colorized ones. I always will choose the black and white ones before I will choose the colorized ones. Now that's movies that were filmed in black and white and then colorized after the fact. Movies in color, I don't, that's, of course I'll watch a movie in color, but right. these old black and white films, when they're colorized, even when they're done well, I still just don't like them. I prefer black and white. I prefer the original black and white. So for me, I did watch this in black and white, which I found out is actually kind of hard to find. But I already had a copy of it because I think on Tubi, if you watch it on Tubi, they only have the colorized version.
No, Tubi has the black and white version.
Oh, do they? Okay, well, I saw the colorized one. It was
Amazon that has the colorized version, and I have a digital copy through Amazon, and I watched it on Blu-ray because I have the 50th anniversary Blu-ray that I found on Amazon.
Yeah. So the digital on Amazon and also on Vudu, I think you can only get the colorized version. Now it's the same with It Came From Beneath the Sea. You can only get the colorized version now. They don't have the black and white version available to purchase digitally.
Now I compared this to It Came From Beneath the Sea. There we go. I compared it to this, and I really think, as far as like colorization goes, I think that they did it better in 20 Million Miles. And I don't even know which one came first. I think 20 Million Miles came first.
As far as colorization goes, I don't know. But as far as like actual films, It Came From Beneath the Sea came first.
Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure like which colorized version came first out of those two, but I will say that I compared it to, because I was curious, because I know that It Came From Beneath the Sea. I watched that one in color also, and I remember thinking that the colors looked really unnatural. And in this one, at least they looked semi-natural. The only issue I had with some of the color was like the skin tones, because all the skin tones look super flat, like this super flat sort of peachy color or olive color for the folks that are supposed to be of Italian descent. So yeah, that's the only real issue I had as far as Ymir, the monster. He looked really great because he was this really bright green. He was this really nice mix of dark and bright greens, and it was just really cool. I imagine that's probably what the people in this time period thought of aliens, was these little green men or these little green monsters. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Getting into our likes and dislikes, since we the opening thoughts are kind of dragging on here, but I do want to say before we get completely out of opening thoughts, one thing, and I do mention it later on in my final thoughts on the movie, in my final review, but one thing I love about, because the way I've been scheduling the Harryhausen films is we've been going in order from release. So our first one that we did was Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, because we skipped over Mighty Joe Young. Then we did It Came from Beneath the Sea, and we skipped Earth versus the Flying Saucers, which was the one just prior to this.
Right.
And then we went to 20 Million Miles to Earth. One of the things I love about watching them in order is that you can see the progression of Harryhausen's skill level. Like, he's always been great with the stop motion, but you can definitely see that as time is going on, he's growing.
Yeah.
There is a shot in this movie where the characters start in front of the Ymir who is passed out and walk behind the Ymir.
Mm.
And that shot, you wouldn't have gotten that in It Came from Beneath the Sea or Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, because I don't think Harryhausen could have done a shot like that until you get to here. But the fact that he keeps experimenting with new things, I've mentioned that before, because I know in Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, you didn't really get the monster interacting with the live actors very much, or the live, surroundings,
Right.
live sets and stuff very much. But then when you get to It Came from Beneath the Sea, you have the octopus that's there interacting with people and with the set around it. And then when you get to here, you get way more of that. So,
oh yeah, and it's super impressive, because one scene in particular that I remember very vividly was the barn scene. When they're trying to capture Ymir in the barn, and he attacked the farmer. I'm just going to call him the farmer, because he didn't have a name or anything like that, and he attacked that guy, and I was really impressed by how Harryhausen and his team was able to merge like the live action people, like our protagonists, Ymir, and the claymation stop motion man that Ymir was attacking.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many great shots in this. And one of the things I do really love about this movie, getting into our likes and dislikes, is how much screen time is dedicated to the Ymir. I talked about it with King Kong last week, that once King Kong is in the movie, they just kind of like, he dominates the movie for the rest of the film. He dominates it. And Ymir is kind of similar. Like, you do get moments where you focus more on the human side of things, but for the amount of screen time that Ymir gets, you can imagine the amount of work that went into that, because each minute of screen time was like hours and hours of actual work, doing the stop motion. So for every minute that he's on screen is a huge amount of work for Harryhausen and his team to do. And so knowing that and seeing the amount of time that the Ymir spends on screen, it's just like amazing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you're right. This process is not cheap. And so, I was impressed. Because it'd been a minute since I'd watched this movie. And I was really surprised, because typically when you get one of these old stop motion animation film or Harryhausen films, because I think that was the only person doing it at the time, you don't get a whole lot of screen time for like the monsters or the dinosaurs or something like that. It's always focused on the humans, and that was for budgetary reasons, of course, because like we said, stop motion is not cheap, and so I was very impressed with how much screen time Ymir got, and so I 100% agree with you that it was fantastic to see that.
Yeah, and I mean, anybody who's listened to this podcast long enough knows how much we love Harryhausen, and we will sing his praises constantly, because we just love the work that he has done.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He definitely wasn't the only person doing stop motion effect at the time. There was definitely a lot of other stop motion effects, but he definitely was the best in the business.
There was other stop motion movies at that time. I don't think he did. Did he do the Giant Behemoth? Do you remember if he did that one?
No, he didn't do that one.
Okay, so I remember that one being stop motion, and that one also being a little bit questionable, because it was okay. It was fine. Stop motion. It wasn't great. It wasn't to the Harryhausen level. But yeah, you're right. I should have probably, I that I was incorrect in saying that Harryhausen was the only person at that time doing it. So
Right. Yeah,
I
because
was incorrect there.
you go all the way to like Planet of the Dinosaurs, and that was stop
Oh.
motion effects and stuff, and that was in the 70s. But also around the same time as this movie, you had the Black Scorpion, which was Willis O'Brien. Who was still working at the time doing little, some stuff. So yeah, there were other people, but I still think, and this is why I don't know if I've said anything different in previous episodes when we talked about Harryhausen, but to me, the Ymir, this monster in this movie, is my favorite Harryhausen monster. Now, this isn't my favorite Harryhausen film, but this is definitely my favorite monster or creature that he's ever done. And one of the reasons is because I felt for this monster. I felt so much sympathy for this creature. And the fact that they were able to make me feel so much sympathy for this stop motion creature that, the maquette is probably only a foot tall, is
sure.
is just shows how great they are. Him and his team was at making these creatures have personality, because I'm like, I feel bad for this monster. I don't want it to get hurt. I want to see it survive.
Yeah, for sure. Like even even the sound effects for the creature, it was just so, for lack of a better word, pitiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like you, man. I was very invested in Ymir. I wasn't so much invested in our human characters, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. But I was very much invested. I like how you compared this to King Kong in a way where where you're able to sort of put yourself in the place of Ymir, because this that he was brought back from his home planet to somewhere he doesn't know. Um, it's in the film that it kind of gives you it implies, there we go, it implies that he doesn't necessarily always grow to that size. It was what in the film it was due to Earth's oxygen. He
Mm-hmm.
grew to that size, so he's not naturally that size. And so I found myself putting myself in his place, where he's suddenly confronted by all these humans that are trying to capture him, trying to kill him. He's at a size that he doesn't his species doesn't always grow to. There we
Mm-hmm.
I guess that, for lack of a better phrase. And I'm like you, I felt real sympathy for him. I felt real sympathy for the character.
Yeah, and he didn't seem like he was out to hurt anyone or anything. Like the astronaut, airman, soldier, whatever he is, William Hopper's character, even said in there that when they were on Venus and they were watching them, that they were never aggressive unless they were provoked. So
Right. Yeah, for
this
sure.
creature, and one of the things I do like about this film is that if you notice, it, every person and every animal that he attacks directly, they are not killed. The dog is still breathing after he attacks the dog, or the dog attacks him and then he fights back. Even the elephant is shown to still be breathing after he walks away. So like, he doesn't kill. And even the farmer that he attacked, they said in the film specifically that he was seriously injured but not killed.
Right.
So obviously, this Ymir is not a bloodthirsty monster that deserves to be killed. Like, I think, and like we said, we were comparing it to King Kong. I had more sympathy for the Ymir at the end of this movie than I did for King Kong in the King Kong 33. I felt, I felt more sadness when, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched this movie, the Ymir dies at the end.
Mhm. I didn't necessarily feel more sadness for Ymir, but I felt the equal amount of sad, because I know we just covered King Kong 33. Like literally we just which is it's great that we're covering this film immediately after Kong 33 because they mirror themselves in some really good ways. So I find myself equally being as sympathetic to Ymir as I was Kong, and then vice versa.
Yeah, see, I think I'm just biased against Kong. I'm just not a huge Kong fan. So I'm more, and it might also be the my emotional state that I was in when I was watching this movie, that I was just like, I feel really bad for this monster and I don't want him to die. So yeah, it is a great creature. Now I do want to ask you, because I've mentioned now my favorite Harryhausen monster or creature, because he never liked calling them monsters. He always called them animals or creatures. I said what my favorite is. That Ymir is my favorite. What is your favorite Harryhausen creature?
Oh man, it's tough because there are so many good ones. But I'm not gonna cop out. I'm not gonna give you my favorite and then give you a runner up. I'm just gonna tell you what my favorite one is.
All right.
Probably it would have to be the dragon from the seventh voyage of Sinbad.
That's a good one. I do really like that one. That's a good one.
And he doesn't get a lot of screen time. I think maybe he only gets like maybe 10 or so minutes of screen time when he battles the Cyclops, but I always really liked that design and the way that maquette moved. I thought it was super well done.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, there's so many good ones. That's the thing. There's so many good ones that it's hard to pick just one. But yeah, I find myself even more than some of the other monsters. The Ymir to me, that Harryhausen has done. The Ymir to me is the one that I feel the most for, and so that's why to me it's my favorite. We are going to be covering the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad coming up soon, hopefully. Let me see. We've done Beast, we've done It Came From Beneath the Sea, then we skipped over Earth versus the Flying Saucers, mainly because that's not necessarily a kaiju film. And we went to 20 Million Miles to Earth, and the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is the next one in line.
Okay, great. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so we've got that one coming up. So I'm hopefully we won't take as big of a break between Harryhausen films as we did last time, because it has been a while since we covered one. So I do want to cover them more often, because I love them, and I want to get through his whole filmography in order, because I love going through these films in order. So that's all of our, I mean, well, not all, but that's the majority of our positives that we have for this film. But do you have any negatives for this film, 20 Million Miles to Earth?
Not necessarily negatives, but the human characters are sort of lackluster. You've got a whole lot of tropes with these human characters. You've got the intelligent but still very what's the best word I can say? Is dependent maybe the same? Like the female lead in this film's not given enough agency. She's given some, but she's given more agency than maybe even the one in It Came From Beneath the Sea, but it's still not quite enough. And then you've got sort of the overbearing lead male actor, and then I just don't think that I just don't really like the human characters for this one, because I just feel like they're sort of lackluster. They're just sort of cookie cutter. But that's probably for good reason. That's, you have to think too, when this film was made and when it was released. And at that time, it was very typical for us to have characters like this in this same mold as the ones we got in this film.
Right. Yeah. And especially in this genre of film, like the sci-fi,
Right. I wish they would have done more with the boy, though. The little boy.
Oh, Pepe.
Yeah, Pepe. There we go. The one.
Pepe, what are you doing?
He's like, I'm not gonna go. Sorry, I'm not gonna go there.
I want the hat and the horse, just like you have in the great country Texas.
Yeah. I couldn't. I was afraid I couldn't do a very good Italian or
Oh yeah,
stereotypical.
I'm doing a great Italian accent, so
Well,
yeah.
I'm gonna let you do you, but I I wish that they would have probably done more with him, because it seems like after what, like the first 30 minutes or so, it just they don't do much else with him, and I think that could have been a really interesting plot line to follow, where he's the one that found Ymir, he's the one, but again, it wouldn't quite make sense for him to have some kind of emotional connection to Ymir because he didn't spend a whole lot of time with Ymir as the monster. He spent more time with Ymir as the egg.
Right,
And
yeah.
so
Now,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, now we usually will call whenever there's a kid protagonist in one of these kaiju films, especially the Japanese kaiju films, we will call them kinnies. So anytime there's a kid in an American monster movie, I want to call them Pepe, because
Okay.
he was the Kinney in this movie. I found him extremely annoying. I was glad when he was off screen because he was really annoying. The rest of the Italian fishermen, they were okay. The Italian accents were way over the top and way horrible. They were not authentic accents at all. Um, and so yeah, I was glad when they just got away from that whole part of the movie and just moved on to them trying to capture the Ymir.
Yeah, it was very forced, and it was fine. It was what I would imagine you would expect from a movie. What is this? Was this what, 57?
57, yeah.
57? Okay, so it's sort of what you would expect from a monster movie in 1957. But
Now I
I'm
will
with
say
you.
this though, you say that, but then the human characters in the Blob, and the Blob came out about the same time. It's a little bit later than this. The Blob, the human characters in it were way better than they are in this film. And I think that, yeah, you do kind of expect, them to be a little shallow and underwritten and stuff because it was the 50s and it was these genre films. They never really spent a lot of time trying to do great acting in these films. Like, even the actors didn't really take them that seriously because they just were like, oh, well, this is just a genre film.
Sure.
But I do want to say that I think the reason why the acting and stuff in this is not up to par is not so much the time period that it came out, but more that this film, and it was, I mean, that's a fun fact that I had, was that this film was created with the idea of it being a showcase for Ray Harryhausen's effects.
Right.
So I think that they just decided to put more emphasis on the effects than anything else. And that's why I didn't really care that much about talking about the director, because the director seemed like he was more there just to keep things in order while, and to move things along from Harryhausen effect to Harryhausen effect. It wasn't necessarily meant to be anything super fantastic. It wasn't meant to be groundbreaking. The effects were meant to be the star of the show. And so that I think that might be why, more than the actual time period.
Mm-hmm. Now, one
Go
other
ahead.
thing I'm going to say, there are some issues with scale in this movie that I have a little bit of a problem with, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe they were just trying to show, like, specifically, I'm thinking of like the elephant scene.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that elephant was way too big. I mean, I don't know what else to say except for
I
it.
have a fun fact about that in the fun
Okay.
fact segment. But yeah, you're right. The scaling of the elephant was kind of off, was a little off. I do have a fun fact. Oh, I do want to ask you now, do you think we should have, or do you think this movie would have been better if we had gotten any of the scenes from the astronauts on Venus? Because it seems like there was a whole nother movie that took place prior to this movie beginning.
I would have liked to have seen at least what happened to cause them to crash. I would at least like to have seen that. I'm assuming from the way I'm assuming, because they don't really tell you, that maybe it was a mechanical malfunction or something like that, a computer malfunction. But Yeah,
I think it had to do with the virus that they had all caught because
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
all of the crew except for the one guy who survived all caught this like deadly
Well,
virus.
see, that's something they don't really explore either, and that's I'm glad you bring that up because I
Hmm.
really would have loved to have seen if the virus was connected to Ymir in any way, shape, or form. At least give us like maybe a 30-second or like couple or 2-minute flashback of them on the ship and something happening to give us some kind of context as to first of
Right.
all, why or how they captured Ymir, or even why they got the virus anyway. But I get what they're going for. They were sort of playing up sort of this mystery, like what is this creature? Where does he like? He comes from Venus. Is he the one that carries the virus? You know, stuff like that. But I really would have wished that they would have explored some of those plot points because it would have helped. I feel like it would have helped out a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and who knows? Because I haven't read the comic book, but maybe a lot of that stuff is explored in the comic book, the sequel comic.
Well, we
So
can't be the only one with that problem, so maybe.
yeah, well, no, I know that the Tokyo Lives guys, when they reviewed this, they talked about how there was this whole other movie that took place before this movie even began, and they kind of wish they would have seen that too. So yeah, I we're not the only ones that feel that way, but that's not to say that I didn't enjoy what we got. I just it was something that I thought of. I was like, oh, there's a whole lot of backstory here that isn't really explored too much. I have a few little like they were more nitpicks and kind of just funny things that I noticed in the movie that I have listed here. One was when the divers were going in to search for the container that had the Ymir egg. Those speedos don't leave a lot to the imagination.
No. No, they sure don't, do they?
Also, did you see the eyebrows on the farmer that the Ymir attacks?
I didn't notice it. Honestly, I really didn't
He
notice it.
had two big furry caterpillars on his face. Just his eyebrows were nuts. And then there was another funny little thing. The Japanese, quote unquote Japanese, because he wasn't actually Japanese, scientist, when they were dealing with the Ymir, when they were actually testing the Ymir and experimenting on it, he is facing away from the camera the entire time. You never see his face. Like he purposely is looking away from the camera, and it's because the actor that they got was not actually Japanese. If you couldn't tell by his accent, he was not
Oh,
actually
well, you know, I can tell just a little bit. Yeah.
I do want to say though that one of the things I like about this film versus some of the previous Harryhausen films, and not just Harryhausen, but the previous 1950s monster movies that we've covered. I'm glad there wasn't a lot of narration. Like there was a little bit of narration at the beginning, and that was it. Like there was just not a whole lot, and I am so glad for that because
Yeah,
I
which is the
hate
typical
narration.
yeah, which is the typical setup for sort of these 1950s monster movies.
Yeah, but I hate narration in movies. I really do. That's a generalization because there's sometimes it works, but for the most part, I do not like narration in movies, and that is one of my pet peeves. Even with the 1950s movies, I'm like, oh, it's just so annoying to hear. I think the giant claw was the worst one that we've had so far, but
It doesn't annoy me maybe to the degree it annoys you. I can kind of get over it because like I said, that's just sort of that's one of the tropes of these 1950s, 60s monster movies.
yeah. So is there any other likes or dislikes that you wanted to share about the movie before we get into some fun facts?
No, not really. I mean, other than just the fact that I really like this movie, I'm both nostalgic for it and it's a good movie.
Yeah. Well, we'll save it for the final thoughts. When we get into final
Oh,
thoughts, we'll
okay.
talk
Well,
about
sorry.
that.
Sorry.
But I was just wondering if you had any more specific likes or
Oh, no, no, no,
dislikes.
no. I'm good.
Okay. So let's talk about some fun facts here before we get into our final thoughts and our Godzuki scores. So, the film was originally going to be set in Chicago. This ties into the question that I had from last week that hinted to this. Um, and the rocket was going to crash into Lake Michigan. But right before submitting the idea to producer Charles Schneer, Ray Harryhausen decided to change the setting to Italy at the last minute after deciding that he always wanted to go on vacation there but could never afford it on his own. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's totally one way to do it. You're right, and I imagine he's not the only director or crew member or senior crew member that has pulled that trick.
Oh yeah, no, that's happens all the time. But one of the things I love about there's a what's his name? But yeah, there's a I listened to an interview one time with Eric Roberts, who's Julia Roberts' brother. He's an actor in his own right, and he's been in a lot of things. He's been in like The Dark Knight and everything, but he's also been in a lot of really crappy movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he always says that the reason why he does a lot of those crappy movies, even though he's a great actor, is because he's like, well, they tell me they'll pay me such and such amount of money, and I get to go to some faraway place and spend like 2 weeks filming, and then spend another 2 weeks just relaxing. It's like, of course I'm going to do it.
Of course, yeah, of course.
It's like, why not?
Yeah.
It's like, who cares?
I would do it too.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the fun fact that I told you that it deals with the elephant. So since he planned to use a real elephant in some of the footage in the zoo, Ray Harryhausen asked for one that was 15 foot tall, but the film crew and everything was only able to procure, or they were only able to get one that was 8 foot tall.
Okay.
So in order to make the elephant look much bigger, they actually had a 4'6" actor cast to play the zookeeper. So if you notice when they show the elephant and the zookeeper there, he is kind of a short guy, right. And that's just to make you feel like the elephant's bigger than what he is. And I think they did the same thing with the actual stop motion elephant. They tried to make him bigger than what the elephant in real life actually was, because they couldn't get the big one.
I just imagine it was just because it's probably very difficult. It's probably actually pretty difficult to really get accurate scaling with something like this too, because you're not dealing with a computer. You're not dealing with computer generated graphics. You're dealing with literal clay models. So it's probably pretty difficult to get everything perfectly in scale. So I just attributed it to that.
Yeah. Also, speaking of the elephant, the man feeding the peanuts to the elephant in the zoo scene when they're going in to see the Ymir before they go in to see it passed out and under sedation, the man that was feeding the peanuts to him is Ray Harryhausen himself. He played that part because the actor who was scheduled to play the part didn't show up, so he stepped in and played that character, and he also is later appears in with the crowd that's fleeing the zoo. So that's a couple of cameos that Ray Harryhausen made in this film.
He's not like Stan Lee. He doesn't make a whole lot of cameos, but he will appear every now and then.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He was always a behind the scenes guy. He never really did a lot of in front of camera work.
Right, for sure.
The original design for the monster was actually a giant cyclops, and you can actually look online and find some of the original drawings and designs that Harryhausen came up with for the cyclops version of the Ymir. And the designs that he used for that, those designs he didn't use for the Ymir, but he did later adapt them for the Cyclops in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad.
That does not surprise me because they are kind of similar.
Yeah, they are very similar, and he actually even made a clay model of the Cyclops version of the Ymir, and he said he didn't like the way it looked. And so that's why he went with the more reptilian looking Ymir that he did. You can actually see a lot of this stuff. There's a documentary that's on, I know it's on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it's on anything else, but it's about Ray Harryhausen, who's like, I forget what they call it, the master of special effects or something like that. There's a documentary about him, and it was filmed and made while he was still alive. And it's really good documentary. So I encourage anybody to go and check that out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. It's in my wish list, or it's in my watch list. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, it's really good, and there's a lot of interviews with other directors and producers and stuff, and how he influenced them in their creations. I like Peter Jackson, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, Tim Burton, all of them. Like, they're just so much of what they've done was inspired by what Ray Harryhausen did. Another fun fact for this movie is after he completed this film, he felt that doing modern day sci-fi thrillers was kind of he kind of got tired of that, and so his interest had shifted into doing more fantasy adventures. Mm-hmm. So that's why you had Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, you had It Came from Beneath the Sea, you had Earth versus Flying Saucers, 20 Million Miles to Earth, and then after this movie, he switches over to, you've got Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, The Mysterious Island, Jason and the Argonauts, things like that. So you can see how he kind of got tired of the modern day setting and wanted to go more fantasy.
Right. And we see what the films that we see after this become less science fiction-y.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And this was the last movie that he did in black and white. The next films that he did were all in color, actually filmed in color, and not just colorized after the fact.
Right. Okay.
So cool. Yeah, this is a very important one in the filmography of Ray Harryhausen for a lot of those reasons. Mm-hmm. So getting into our final thoughts and our Godzooky scores. If anyone is unfamiliar with the podcast, we like to score our movies out of 5 Godzookys instead of 5 stars, because we like to embrace the silly side of monster movies and pay homage to the great Godzooky, who was Godzilla's bumbling nephew from the Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 70s, by using him as our yardstick to measure these movies. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you, out of 5 Godzookies, how many do you give 20 Million Miles to Earth, and what are your final thoughts?
4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 Godzookis. That's an easy one. It does have some issues. Like I said, the human characters are a little bit lackluster. They're not, they're your typical 1950s, 60s human protagonists for a science fiction film. That does not say that their acting isn't good, because it's good, but it's just very cookie cutter. And that's probably one of my biggest issues with it. Other than that, I mean, I'm trying to not let nostalgia cloud my judgment here, but I'm going to have to just give in and say that, yeah, a little bit of nostalgia is going to cloud my judgment here, because I do remember watching this film as a kid. I do remember enjoying it and being so fascinated by what I was seeing on screen. And the miniatures, all of it, the special effects work by Mr. Harryhausen. I mean, all fantastic. And the story's not terrible either. I mean, it's a fairly original story for its time. And I'm like you. I like it when I can empathize or sympathize. I'm not sure which word I'm supposed to use here, but I'm just going to go with empathize with the monster a little bit, similar to how I felt in the original Kong film. And like I said, this movie does mirror King Kong in some really significant ways. But overall, I just think it's a good film. It's a good monster movie. It's a good science. If you like, science fiction, monster movies, if you like the blend of those two things, then by all means watch this, because like we've talked about, it is a very it's a very important film in the catalog of Ray Harryhausen.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I am going to give it 4 out of 5 Godzookis as well. I wrote down my final thoughts, so I'm just going to read them out that I have as I have them written. Of all the creatures that Ray Harryhausen created, the Ymir from this film is the one that I connect with the most on an emotional level. The fact that a stop-motion miniature can elicit such sympathy is a testament to how well Harryhausen and his crew was at giving his creations personality. As a showcase for technical effects, the movie shines. if you watch the Harryhausen filmography in order, you can clearly see how he develops and improves as an artist, and this film is no exception. The biggest drawback for it, though, like many of Harryhausen's other films, is that the effects far outshine everything else. The cheesy acting, the hammy dialogue, and the lackluster music does the movie no favors. However, none of this can take away the fantastic monster effects. Overall, it is a fantastic monster movie featuring one of the greatest stop-motion creatures ever put to film. And so that's my final thoughts there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And if people haven't figured it out by now, we really like this film. It's like, like I said, it's an important one and worth having in any giant monster fans collection, or just viewing it at least. Even if you don't purchase to have it, at least watch it once, because some of these effects, although some of them are dated, but it's mainly just maybe the acting that's dated. I'll say that more so than the effects, because to me, even the effects still hold up fairly well to this day.
Oh yeah. I think that it holds up. I think it holds up better than some of the other 50s giant monster movies that we might have watched before this. Even some of the other Harryhausen films. I mean, as much as I love the Rhedosaurus from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, as much as I love the octopus from It Came From Beneath the Sea, I think the Ymir holds up better than them. And I think I think it goes back to that he was experimenting with and improving his effects more, like the shots that he does in each one. And we're going to see it as we continue through his filmography, because when you get to Sinbad, the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which is our next one, you really see where Harryhausen goes full hog in his way of making the miniatures interact with the environment around them and the live action actors and stuff. So yeah, I think that this movie holds up really well. All right.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah. So that's going to be it for our thoughts on 20 Million Miles to Earth. So now we have one more segment to cover before we finish off the episode. And you know what segment that is?
The mailbag.
The mailbag.
What's in the mail today?
So we are continuing Kershaw's email, my best friend in the whole wide world. Kershaw sent us an email. We have covered one of the questions that he had for us, and he had two more that I said we were going to continue to read out on the podcast. So continuing that email, he says, I'm loving the themed months. Not sure if y'all, he's from the South like me, so he says y'all a lot, are taking suggestions, but I do love when y'all hint at and talk tokusatsu. Maybe you could have something like More Phenomenal Month. Maybe talk about the Power Rangers movies that are already out there, whether good or bad. Oh, I know Michael would be interested in doing that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Kershaw said, I rewatched the Turbo movie. He said, I rewatched the Turbo movie so much, my parents had to buy me multiple copies.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good on you. I've seen it a bunch, but I've not seen it. I've probably not seen it as much as you, though.
I watch it. I watch it usually once a year is about when I watch it, because I do like revisiting the Turbo movie. Kershaw's a little bit younger than me and you, so maybe that was the movie that came out right at that right time for him, so that's why he likes that one more. Because for me, that's how I was with the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. I just watched it constantly.
Same.
And then he also said there was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie and the one that came out not too long ago. I think 2014 was, or
2017.
2017, yeah. And there's also talks of a new reboot movie that's out there. Yeah, we have covered that in the news. So maybe you could do a synopsis of your favorite season or episode of Power Rangers. Travis can pull out his Super Sentai knowledge here and there. Maybe even have a show where you encourage fans to write in about their favorite episode, moment, or memory of the show or regarding the show. So that's just some thoughts that Kershaw wanted to share with us, because he's, like he said, he's enjoying how we're doing the themed months. Like we said, this month for September is Space Monster Month. So he's talking about maybe doing a Power Rangers month.
Well, Travis, you know that I've been binging me some Power Rangers lately. And so I'm up to, I just started Zeo, which has been super great. I'm so excited to get in a little bit deeper. And I started out saying that I'm only going to watch up to the point where I stopped, which was Lost Galaxy. And then I'm just going to stop. But the longer I go into this, I'm like, man, I probably just need to watch all the way through the franchise now at this point, just to see how it's progressed from the very first Day of the Dumpster episode all the way up to whatever episode title they're up to now. So with that said, Travis, I'm going to go ahead and make an executive decision and say that March of 2021, we're going to do More Phenomenal Month. We're going to do More Phenomenal March. There we go. More Phenomenal March 2021. So yeah, great idea, Kershaw. Travis's best friend in the whole wide world. So thank you so much. I wish that you were more. I wish that you were on social media more so that we could talk about Power Rangers and our love for Power Rangers and the Turbo.
Yeah, that is one thing I did know. Like I don't know how me and Kershaw have been friends this long and not talked about our love for giant monster movies, because it just never came up, I guess. But one thing I did know about Kershaw was his love for Power Rangers, because me and him both, one time when he came over and was visiting for the weekend or a week or however long he came and stayed, I can't even remember now, we watched as many of the Power Rangers series as we could get through, because there was a lot of them that I had not seen, because I did stop watching at a certain point, and so I have to go back and catch up. And I stayed with the series a lot longer than you did, but I did.
I was getting ready to ask you where you stopped, because like I said, I stopped at Lost Galaxy. That was the series right after In Space, and
I think I stayed through. I think I might have dropped off right around RPM, which is right there in the, I think is still in the Disney era. So of Power Rangers. So yeah, I stayed on for a while.
Yeah, like I said, I'm right in the middle of the original run of the show back in the early 90s. And I think I'm going to have to just stick with it through the entire, even through some of the contemporary stuff, because I've been interacting with several people online, and man, I feel like I would be doing myself a disjustice by not just sticking with it throughout the entire franchise.
Now, let me tell you, because I do watch Super Sentai, and I know how you feel about Super Sentai, so I won't get into that. Right. But I have been watching Super Sentai and here and there, and you're in Zeo. Is that where you're starting? You said
Zeo, yes.
Okay. The Super Sentai series that Zeo is adapted from, which is Old Ranger, is wild, and I am going to force you to watch at least one episode of that with me, because that show is wild. There was two of them. There's Die Ranger, that was adapted into like season 3 of Power Rangers when they got their Ninja Zords? Yeah. That was Die Ranger, which is the Super Sentai series, and then O Ranger, and the two of them are so crazy, and they're so different from the Power Rangers adaptations. They're absolutely nothing like Power Rangers, and that's one of the things I like about it. It's like, because that's how I'm able to enjoy Super Sentai, is the fact that they're so different that it's almost like a totally different show. And
I'm sure that we will, because we can't do a More Phenomenal month without covering at least one episode of our show talking about just Super Sentai. We can't.
We may do that as a bonus episode. I may force you to watch a Super Sentai episode with
maybe, and then we just okay. I'd be more keen to do that. Just do a bonus episode, like do the origins of Power Rangers, and then spend the entire month with the actual Power Rangers show.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a lot coming up, a lot of Power Rangers content coming up. So stay tuned for that. The only other thing I want to do for this episode is ask the trivia question that is hinting to next week's episode. So I decided to throw a softball this time and not go too deep into like the trivia. And the question is, what animated series is directly connected to the 1966 Ultraman show, serving as a pseudo sequel?
Okay.
So if anybody, and we're going to have a special guest on for that episode. So
we sure
we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're going to have Alex from the Monsters vs. Men podcast going to be joining us for that one.
Yeah. So the only other thing to do is to thank everyone for listening to this episode and sharing it with your friends. We really appreciate the number of people who are picking up on our podcast and listening to it, and how the community around our podcast is growing. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at Kaiju Weekly and at Kaiju Groupie Pod. That's me and Michael on Twitter. All the links to our social media, including the email that you can send your emails to, are in the description of this episode, as well as links to the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, where you can find like-minded kaiju fans who spend a lot of time talking about kaiju and not a lot of time bickering about who would win the fight between even though there is some of that. But I think that's mostly Travis, from us doing Kaiju Clash.
I was going to say, isn't a whole segment of our show dedicated to that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we're bringing Kaiju Clash back for next week. So be prepared for that too, listeners. You can send your questions, comments, or answers to trivia questions to our email, kaijuweekly@gmail.com. We also want to say a big thank you to Alex, Shijir, and Thorax for supporting us on Patreon. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/kaijuweekly. And you know what I'm going to mention. Help us reach our goal of going to Blobfest next year. Because I want to go to Blobfest and I want to see the goo. I must see the goo.
The goo. Hashtag must see the goo.
I must see the goo.
That is the new official podcast hashtag of the show.
We've got that and hashtag Justice for Baragon.
So we've got two official hashtags for the show. Hashtag Justice for Baragon and hashtag must see the goo. But Travis, do you know what else they can do to help us?
What else can they do
about this podcast?
Spread the great word of kaiju.
Spread the gospel of kaiju. No, I'm not even going to go there. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But they can go on to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and review. And like we always say, criticize us all you want in the comments, but make it 5 stars worth. And what that's going to do is that's going to put us in front of other kaiju and tokusatsu fans just like you. And it's going to help us grow the show. It's going to help us have more interesting conversations, and it's going to help us reach more people within the community just by simply giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Yep. And so, to close out this episode, I'm going to say, help control the Pepe population. Have your Ymirs spayed or neutered. Pepe, what are you doing? The hat is too tight. It kill your brain. You were going to say something, but...
I'm just going to leave it alone. Bye, guys.
Bye.